Hello again. I've been asked given my share of experience in directing a master in procurement management, to share with you my ideas and thoughts on why is it important to train in procurement. And let me start with an example, first of all, since we have it at hand. The 2004 EU directive, they create all sorts of challenges, but one which I'd like to stress now is the issue of the incredible amount of new instruments that the directive has given to procurement officials. This increased number of instruments obviously increases the flexibility of procurement, which is good on the one hand. If you look at procedure, you now have more tools to better adapt acquisitions to fast-changing markets, which is a good thing. But then again, it's more complex. You need to master these tools, and that's not an obvious thing. In organization also, big trade-offs. Obviously now we're talking about what Paul was talking this morning about more empowerment to public buyers to do innovative procurement. Many times they were complaining, I cannot do that because I don't have that instrument. Now they cannot complain, obviously. They have the chance to do it. But obviously, if you don't master them well, again, big scope for mistakes and waste. And when I talk about waste, I talk not only about inefficiency, but I also talk about the possibility of corruption. And let me point out that, again, because sometimes data magically appear because some public official in some countries is more generous than usual, in Italy, we've had the chance of giving data to three very well-known young economists who are now, because it's so rare to do a study in procurement, but also because they're good, publishing this paper on the best scientific journal that we have in economics, which is the American Economic Review. What did they do? They had all prices for a big chunk of commodities that public administrations paid in Italy over a long range of years. And the paper is really dense, but there's three questions that I like to put forward here. They noticed this big variability that I was talking about this morning, and about prices, same goods bought at very different prices, which is, by the way, something that the audit court in England, in the UK, notices every year by giving very interesting examples. And Italy is no exception. But they do an interesting, they can measure, in a sense, all this waste that goes on. And they ask this simple question: if all public bodies were to pay the same price as the 10% best public administration, what would happen to public expenditure on goods and services? Go down by 21%. Now, let's put this in the context of how much we pay in goods and expenditure, in goods and services, in a share of GDP. Well, then you get that if the worst go to the best, we're talking about a savings of 1.6, 2.1 GDP. Huge, 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 huge. It's approximately 2% decline in taxation of a GDP in the long run. Then they asked another incredible question. They said, because they found a trick, they were able to measure the source of this waste, or at least they claim, but the referees have said that they did it well. There's two ways that you can lead to this waste of high prices. One is due to corruption, one is due to inefficiency, the sheer incompetence in doing things, which leads also to another phenomenon which is important, the one of capture of public procurers that procure the wrong goods just because big firms that know better convince them to do that. And being in Italy, I am sure that a lot of people would have expected, well, the big majority of this waste is corruption. I had a sense, maybe because of my upbringing into university world, that the issue of inefficiency was to play a large part. And lo and behold, what they find is that 80% of this waste, they call it passive, i.e., not due to corruption, but due to pure sheer inefficiency, not knowing how to do procurement. This is a fantastic news, fantastic. Because as we know, to eradicate corruption, well, you have a long work to do in changing the culture of a country. But in eradicating inefficiency, you have the solution at hand, which is training, which is just simple learning. So a lot of us were very happy. Then they found a third result, which I'd like to put forward here. They linked, they made an argument linking wages to quality, which I made this morning. They looked at what, among all this public administration, what the centralized body that I talked about this morning was doing. Also because they wanted to know, they had a feeling that higher wages bring better training. So what happens in organizations that pay better because they hire the best people? And you see the results. Now, these are not numbers that I threw at you like this morning, but these are numbers that come out from a scientific paper. And we're talking about huge amount of savings in organizations where not only you can centralize through economies of scale. So part of that result is obviously due to economies of scale. But I'm sure that part of that result is due to the fact that these agencies are capable of hiring the best people. Once again, better drafted contracts point to a role of training. So first, why train? Obvious. Savings, better quality. Now, second issue, why train? And once again, I go back to the issue of training in ethics, which I think is really important, as I was saying this morning. The problem is that you just don't have the goal of ending the year with the number of tenders that you were asked to do. You also have to achieve those tenders in an ethical manner. If only because by achieving them in an ethical manner, you don't expose yourself to corruption and or at least you minimize the risk you reduce the risk of exposing yourself to corruption that we were talking just now with Transparency International. Just to give you a sense of how wrong we were doing things in my organization, there was our shareholder. We had only one shareholder, which was the Ministry of the Economy and Finance, 100% owned by them. Well, they were giving us a bonus at year-end based on the number of tenders that we were capable of achieving at the end of the year. So when the board was asking sometimes, well, let's do less tenders and let's do more training, the answer was, but we don't have time. We don't have time. We need to finish. So usually it's very hard to give a bonus on ethics, obviously. So when you cannot give a bonus on ethics, it's very hard to give a bonus only on another goal, because then everybody will try to pursue that goal. The organization, the employees would have screamed if we had said, no, do less tenders and do more training, only because they had that bonus. Remove that bonus, and the employees would not have screamed. Which leads to the issue that there's sort of a sense of being ashamed when you enter an organization and you stress the issue of ethics, because it's as if you're telling people that, or at least you think that you're telling people that they are sort of thieves. And there's a lot to say about how wrong that is. I was listening to Paul, who said something very important today. There's a very big literature that says that people in organization work much less when they are controlled. And the same literature stresses that you work much more when you have trust and when the leader gives you ample vision of the mission of the firm. So I have the impression that the organizations of procurement that stress the ethical aspect very much do not risk being booed by their crowd, but actually to move an organization even further on with the ethical goal.